They told me I was nothing but a burden, living in their house out of charity. What they didn't know was that I had been paying the mortgage on that house for 23 years before they were even married. When I finally handed them those paid-off mortgage papers and walked out the door with my suitcase, the look on their faces was worth every tear I'd cried in that house I no longer called home. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of family betrayal and finding your strength later in life. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Dorothy Washington, but everyone calls me Dot. I'm 67 years old, and for most of my life, I thought being a good mother meant sacrificing everything for your children. I worked as a school secretary for 40 years, often taking on weekend cleaning jobs just to make sure my 3 children had what they needed. When my husband James passed away 12 years ago, I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. I was wrong. It started innocently enough. My son Marcus called me 3 years ago, his voice heavy with worry. "Mom, we're in a tough spot," he said. "I lost my job and Tanya's only working part-time at the salon. We might lose our apartment. Could we maybe stay with you for a few months? Just until I get back on my feet." What mother says no to that? My house had 4 bedrooms, more than enough space for Marcus, his wife Tanya, and their 2 children, 8-year-old Jaden and 6-year-old Kira. I had paid off the mortgage 2 years before James died, so there was no financial pressure. I told myself it would be nice to have family around, especially the grandchildren. "Of course, baby," I told him. "You know this will always be your home." Those words would come back to haunt me. The first few months weren't too bad. Marcus was actively looking for work, Tanya helped with some of the household chores, and the children brought laughter back into rooms that had been quiet for too long. But as the months stretched on, things began to change. Marcus found a job at a warehouse, but instead of saving money to move out, he seemed to settle in. Tanya stopped helping around the house and started treating me like the hired help. "Dot, can you watch the kids while I go out with my friends?" Became a daily request, not a question. "Dot, we're out of groceries again," she'd announce, as if it was my responsibility to keep the refrigerator stocked for 6 people on my fixed income. But the worst part wasn't the extra expenses or the lost privacy. It was the way they began to speak to me, or rather, about me, as if I wasn't there. "Your mother needs to understand that things are different now," I heard Tanya telling Marcus one evening. I was washing dishes in the kitchen, and they were in the living room watching television. "She can't just do whatever she wants anymore. This affects all of us." "I know, baby. She's getting older. Sometimes old people get set in their ways," Marcus replied. Old people, set in their ways. I was standing in my own kitchen, washing dishes in my own home, and my son was talking about me like I was some stubborn relative who had overstayed her welcome. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling of the master bedroom, the room James and I had shared for 32 years, the room where I had nursed each of my children through fevers and nightmares. I wondered when exactly I had become a guest in my own home. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. I had spent the day babysitting Jaden and Kira, because their school was closed for teacher conferences, and Tanya had gone to get her nails done. When Marcus came home from work, he found me helping the children with their homework at the kitchen table, the same table where I had helped him with his homework 30 years earlier. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, and something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "What is it, honey?" "Tanya and I have been discussing the situation here, and we think it's time to set some boundaries." Boundaries? In my own house? What kind of boundaries?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "Well, for starters, you can't just invite people over without checking with us first. Mrs. Chen from next door was here yesterday, and Tanya felt uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen was 82 years old and brought me vegetables from her garden. She had been my neighbor for 15 years. "This is my house, Marcus," I said quietly. "I know that, Mom. But we all live here now. We have to think about what's best for the family." The family. As if I wasn't part of it. "And another thing," he continued, "maybe you could eat dinner a little earlier, before we get home. The kitchen gets pretty crowded with all of us trying to eat at the same time." I stared at my son, this man I had raised, whose diapers I had changed, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose college tuition I had worked double shifts to pay. He was asking me to eat dinner alone so his family could have the kitchen table in my own home. "Okay," I whispered, because I didn't trust my voice to say anything else. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I ate my dinner at 40:30 in the afternoon, alone at the kitchen table, listening to the sounds of my son's family laughing together in the living room. The meatloaf I had made tasted like cardboard, but I wasn't sure if that was because of the recipe or the tears I kept swallowing. As I cleaned my single plate and put it away, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. The face looking back at me was tired, defeated, and somehow smaller than I remembered. When had I become so invisible in my own life? I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, not knowing that the worst was yet to come, and that sometimes the deepest cuts come from the people we love most. The weeks following our boundary conversation felt like walking on eggshells in my own home. I found myself apologizing for existing, asking permission to use my own living room, and tiptoeing around so I wouldn't disturb anyone. I had become a ghost haunting my own life. Marcus found small ways to remind me of my place. When I asked if I could use the car to visit my doctor, he sighed heavily and said, "Mom, you really should have given us more notice. We have plans." The car was mine, a 2018 Honda Civic I had bought with money from James's life insurance policy. Tanya was more direct in her disrespect. She would roll her eyes when I spoke, interrupt me mid-sentence when I was talking to the grandchildren, and make comments about how some people didn't understand how the modern world worked. When I offered to cook Sunday dinner, a tradition I had maintained for 40 years, she told me not to bother because the children preferred her cooking. The children, my precious grandchildren, were learning to treat me the same way. When I offered to help Kira with her reading, she said, "Mommy says you don't know the new way they teach reading now." When Jaden needed help with his math homework, he told me, "Dad says I should ask him because he's better at numbers." I was being erased from my own family, one small dismissal at a time. But the moment that changed everything happened on a Thursday evening in November. I had gone to bed early with a headache, but I couldn't sleep. I got up around 10 o'clock to get some aspirin from the kitchen and heard voices coming from the living room. Marcus and Tanya were on the phone with someone, and they had it on speaker. I should have announced myself. I should have walked right through the living room to the kitchen. Instead, something made me pause in the hallway when I heard my name. "Honestly, Lisa, I don't know how much longer we can deal with this situation," Tanya was saying. Lisa was Marcus's sister, my daughter who lived in California. My heart started pounding as I realized they were talking about me. "What do you mean?" Lisa's voice came through the speaker, tinny but clear. "Your mother is becoming such a burden," Tanya continued. "She's always underfoot, always wanting attention, and she's getting more difficult every day." "Now, Tanya," Marcus said, but his voice lacked any real disagreement. "Mom's not that bad?" "Not that bad. Marcus, she acts like this is her house or something. She wants to rearrange furniture, she complains when we have friends over, she expects us to check with her before we make plans. It's exhausting." My legs felt weak. I leaned against the hallway wall, my hand pressed to my chest where my heart was hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it. "But it is her house," Lisa said, and for a moment I felt a surge of hope that at least one of my children remembered the truth. "Legally, yes," Marcus said. "But morally? Mom, she's lived alone in this big house for years, while families like ours struggle to find affordable housing. The right thing to do would be to sign it over to us so we can build some equity, start building wealth for Jaden and Kira's future. Plus," Tanya added, "we're the ones maintaining it now. We're the ones paying for repairs and improvements. She just lives here. Just lives here. In the house I had worked 2 jobs to pay for. In the house where I had scraped together mortgage payments even when James was between jobs. In the house I had painted every room by myself because we couldn't afford contractors." "I don't know," Lisa said. "That seems like a big ask." "Think about it," Marcus continued. "What does Mom really need a 4-bedroom house for? She could be just as happy in a nice senior apartment somewhere, maybe one of those active communities with activities and people her own age. And honestly," Tanya's voice got quieter, as if she was sharing a secret, "I think it would be better for her mental health. She's becoming so isolated and bitter. Yesterday she actually got upset because I rearranged the living room furniture. I mean, who gets that attached to where a couch sits?" The couch she was talking about was the one James and I had saved for 6 months to buy. It sat in exactly the spot where we had placed it 15 years ago because from there, you could see both the front yard where we used to watch the children play and the kitchen where I cooked thousands of meals for this family. "She's just getting older," Marcus said. "You know how old people get. They become set in their ways, kind of selfish about their routines. She doesn't understand that families have to make compromises." Selfish. My son was calling me selfish for wanting to feel welcome in my own home. "The thing is," Tanya continued, "we're doing her a favor by staying here. She'd be completely alone otherwise. No one to help her if something happened, no one to drive her places when she gets too old to drive. She should be grateful we're willing to take care of her." Take care of me. As if I wasn't taking care of myself, taking care of them, taking care of everyone, but getting nothing in return. "But she doesn't act grateful," Marcus said. "She acts like she's doing us some big favor by letting us live in her house. She doesn't seem to understand that this arrangement benefits everyone. Benefits everyone. I thought about my grocery bills that had tripled, my utility bills that had doubled, my quiet, peaceful home that had become a place where I felt like an intruder. Maybe you should just be direct with her, Lisa said. Tell her how you feel. We've tried, Tanya said with a dramatic sigh. But she's so sensitive. Everything is a big drama with her. Honestly, sometimes I think she just likes playing the victim. Playing the victim. I closed my eyes and pressed my back against the wall, feeling like I might collapse right there in my own hallway. You know what the real problem is? Marcus said, and his voice took on a tone I had never heard before, cold and calculating. Mom never really learned how to let go. She's one of those mothers who can't accept that her children are grown up and have their own families now. She wants to still be the center of attention. Exactly, Tanya agreed. It's like she thinks because she raised you, she deserves some kind of special treatment forever. But that's not how the real world works. The real world. In the real world I lived in, the world where I had sacrificed everything for my children, mothers who had given their whole lives to their families were honored and respected, not dismissed as burdens. Well, hang in there, Lisa said. Maybe she'll come around? We hope so, Marcus said. Because honestly, if this keeps up, we might have to consider other options. Like maybe it's time for her to look into one of those senior communities, for everyone's sake. They talked for a few more minutes about other things: Jaden's soccer team, Kira's school play, Tanya's sister's new job. Normal family conversation, as if they hadn't just spent 20 minutes discussing how to get rid of me. I stood in that hallway for a long time after they hung up, processing what I had heard. These people, my son and his wife, saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to overcome, a problem to solve. They weren't grateful for the home I was providing or the help I gave with the children. They saw my presence in my own house as an inconvenience. But the most painful part wasn't their ingratitude or their disrespect. It was the realization that I had allowed this to happen. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that I was Dorothy Washington, a woman who had raised 3 children on her own after her husband died, who had worked 40 years without missing a day, who had paid off a mortgage and built a life through sheer determination and love. I had let them make me small. As I finally made my way to the kitchen for that aspirin, my hands shaking as I filled a glass with water, I caught my reflection again in the window over the sink. But this time, instead of seeing a tired, defeated woman, I saw something else flickering in my eyes. I saw anger, and for the first time in 3 years that felt like progress. That anger I felt in the kitchen became my secret companion over the next few days. I carried it with me like a small flame, warming me when Marcus spoke to me like I was a child, sustaining me when Tanya rolled her eyes at my suggestions, strengthening me when I heard them whispering about the situation. Again. But anger without action is just poison you drink hoping to hurt someone else. I needed to do something constructive with this new fire burning inside me. On Saturday morning, while Marcus and Tanya were out with the children, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went into my bedroom and pulled out the old wooden box I kept in the back of my closet, the one that held all my important papers. I sat on my bed and spread them out like pieces of a puzzle I was trying to solve. The house deed with my name and James's name on it. The mortgage papers stamped PIDNFL in red letters. My bank statements showing my pension deposits every month. My savings account that I had barely touched since James died. My life insurance policy. My retirement account statements. For 3 years I had been living like I was poor, like I was dependent on Marcus and Tanya's charity. But looking at these papers, I realized the truth. I wasn't poor. I wasn't dependent. I was just scared and lonely, and I had let that fear convince me that I needed them more than they needed me. James and I had been good with money. We had lived below our means, saved consistently, and made smart choices. When he died, between his life insurance, his retirement benefits, and my own savings, I was actually quite comfortable. Not wealthy, but secure. More secure, I realized with growing amazement, than Marcus and Tanya, who lived paycheck to paycheck and had never managed to save enough for a down payment on their own place. I pulled out my laptop, the one Tanya always complained was too old and slow, and started doing research. What I found surprised me. My house, according to online real estate sites, was now worth almost twice what James and I had paid for it 20 years ago. The neighborhood had improved, property values had risen, and my little 4-bedroom house was now a significant asset. But more interesting were the rental listings I found. I could rent a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in a senior community, just 20 minutes away for less than what I was spending on groceries and utilities for 6 people. There were communities with pools, fitness centers, organized activities, and people my own age who might actually enjoy my company. For the first time in years, I started imagining a different life. A life where I could eat dinner at a normal time. where I could invite Mrs. Chen over for tea without asking permission, where I could watch my own television shows and arrange my own furniture, and have conversations with people who valued what I had to say. That evening, I made an excuse about having a headache and went to bed early again. But instead of lying there feeling sorry for myself, I spent hours on my laptop researching. I looked up senior communities, not just locally but in other states. I researched the cost of moving, the process of selling a house, the requirements for establishing residency somewhere new. And I kept coming back to one place, St. Petersburg, Florida. My sister Ruth had always wanted to retire there. She used to send me brochures and articles about the warm weather, the beautiful beaches, the active senior communities. She would say, when James retires, you two should move down here with Harold and me. We could be neighbors again. Ruth had passed away 2 years ago, but I still had those brochures she had sent me. I pulled them out of the box and looked at them with new eyes. The senior communities looked lovely, well maintained, safe, with people who seemed genuinely happy. There were book clubs and exercise classes and volunteer opportunities. I started calculating. If I sold my house at current market value, I could buy a beautiful condominium in Florida and still have money left over. My pension would go further in Florida than it did here. I would have no mortgage, low maintenance fees, and enough saved to live comfortably for the rest of my life. But more importantly, I would have my dignity back. Sunday morning came, and with it, the weekly family meeting that Marcus had instituted a few months earlier. We need to communicate better as a family, he had said, though mostly these meetings consisted of him and Tanya telling me about changes they wanted to make to my house or my routine. We sat around the kitchen table, the table I had eaten thousands of meals at, where I had helped my children with homework, where James and I had planned our budget and our dreams. Now I sat there like a tenant being informed of new rules by her landlords. Mom, Marcus began, Tanya and I have been talking, and we think it's time to make some improvements to the house. What kind of improvements? I asked. Well, the master bathroom is pretty outdated. We'd like to renovate it, maybe put in one of those walk-in showers, update the fixtures, retile the whole thing. The master bathroom, my bathroom in my bedroom that they wanted to renovate to their taste. That sounds expensive, I said carefully. It would be, Tanya agreed. But we found a contractor who could do it for about $15,000. And really, it would increase the home's value. $15,000. To renovate my bathroom for their comfort. Of course we'd expect you to cover the cost, Marcus said, since it's your house and all. But we'd handle all the coordination, pick out the materials, supervise the work. They wanted me to pay $15,000 for renovations I didn't want, in designs I wouldn't choose, for their benefit. And they presented it like they were doing me a favor. Old Dorothy would have said yes. Old Dorothy would have worried about seeming difficult or ungrateful. Old Dorothy would have found a way to make it work, maybe taking money out of her savings to make her son happy. But I wasn't old Dorothy anymore. Let me think about it, I said. The look that passed between Marcus and Tanya was quick, but I caught it. It was the look of two people who had expected easy compliance and were annoyed by unexpected resistance. Well, don't think too long, Tanya said with a tight smile. The contractor is really busy. If we wait too long, he might not be available. After they left for Tanya's mother's house, taking the children with them, I sat alone in my kitchen and made a decision that would change everything. I picked up my phone and called a real estate agent. Hello, this is Dorothy Washington, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in years. I'd like to discuss selling my house. That conversation lasted an hour. The agent, Mrs. Rodriguez, was professional and kind. She walked me through the process, explained the current market conditions, and gave me a preliminary estimate that was even higher than what I had seen online. Mrs. Washington, she said, in this market, your house should sell very quickly. It's exactly what young families are looking for: good neighborhood, good schools, well-maintained property. Are you thinking of moving to something smaller? Actually, I said, surprised by how good it felt to say it out loud, I'm thinking of moving to Florida. How wonderful! What a perfect time in your life for a new adventure. A new adventure. Not a retreat or an escape, but an adventure. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and looked around at the house that had been my home for so many years. I felt sad, yes, but I also felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. I felt free. That night, I went to sleep with a plan forming in my mind. It would take time, and it would require careful coordination, but for the first time in 3 years, I had something to look forward to. I was going to take my life back. Living with a secret plan was like carrying a precious seed in my pocket, something fragile and full of potential that I had to protect until it was ready to grow. For 2 weeks, I went about my daily routine while quietly putting the pieces of my new life into place. Mrs. Rodriguez came by on a Tuesday morning while Marcus and Tanya were at work and the children were at school. She walked through my house with professional appreciation, taking notes and photographs. "Mrs. Washington, this is a beautiful home," she said, running her hand along the hardwood banister I had refinished myself 10 years ago. "You've taken excellent care of it. I can see the love in every detail. Love. Yes, that's what these walls held, decades of love, sacrifice, and memories. But love shouldn't be a prison, and memories shouldn't be chains that keep you trapped in a situation that's stealing your peace." "How quickly do you think it might sell?" I asked. "In this market with this condition, I'd say 30 to 60 days maximum. Maybe sooner if we price it right. 30 to 60 days. In 2 months, I could be free." That afternoon, I called a moving company in Florida and got quotes for a long-distance move. I researched senior communities in St. Petersburg and filled out applications for 3 that looked particularly appealing. I even called a few and spoke with their resident coordinators, who were warm and welcoming in a way that made my heart ache with longing. "Mrs. Washington, you sound like you'd fit right in here," said Janet from Sunshine Palms, a community that overlooked a small lake. "We have book clubs, gardening clubs, a walking group that goes to the beach twice a week. And our residents come from all over the country, so everyone understands what it's like to start fresh. Start fresh." At 67 years old, I was going to start fresh. But keeping the secret while living with Marcus and Tanya was becoming increasingly difficult, especially as their demands and disrespect continued to escalate. The bathroom renovation had become a daily topic of conversation. When I hadn't given them an answer by the end of the week, Tanya started making pointed comments about how some people couldn't make decisions and how indecisiveness was holding everyone back. "Mom, we really need an answer," Marcus said one evening. "The contractor is getting impatient." "I told you I'm thinking about it," I replied. "What's to think about?" Tanya interjected from the couch, not even bothering to look up from her phone. "It's not like you use that bathroom for anything special. You just shower and brush your teeth like everyone else. Just shower and brush your teeth." As if the bathroom where I had gotten ready for my wedding, where I had bathed my babies, where I had cried after James's funeral, was just a functional space with no emotional significance. "Maybe she's worried about the money," Marcus said as if I wasn't sitting right there. "Mom, you know we're good for it if you need help with the payment plan." Good for it. My son, who hadn't managed to save enough money to move out of his mother's house in 3 years, was offering to help me finance renovations to my own home. But the bathroom wasn't even the worst of it. They had started making other assumptions about what I would and wouldn't mind changing. Tanya announced that she was tired of the old lady decorations in the living room and wanted to modernize the space. She showed me pictures of stark, minimalist furniture that looked nothing like the warm, comfortable home James and I had created. "Don't worry," she said, as if she was being generous. "We'll donate your old stuff to charity. Someone will get good use out of it." My old stuff. The antique rocking chair that had been my grandmother's. The coffee table James had built with his own hands. The family photos and frames I had carefully chosen over the years. When I suggested that maybe we could incorporate some of my existing pieces into any new design, Tanya laughed. You can't mix old and new like that. It just looks confused, like me apparently." The breaking point came on a Thursday evening that I will never forget. I had spent the day at the library, researching Florida communities and quietly printing out applications and information. When I came home, I found Marcus in my bedroom, going through my desk. "What are you doing?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Looking for the insurance papers," he said, not even looking embarrassed. "Tanya thinks we should increase the homeowner's coverage before we do the bathroom renovation." He was in my personal space, going through my private papers, making decisions about my insurance, and acting like this was perfectly normal. "Marcus, those papers are private. If you needed something, you should have asked me." "Mum, don't be dramatic. We're family. Besides, if something happened to you, I'd need to know where everything is anyway." "If something happened to me." As if he was just being practical, preparing for my death while I stood there very much alive. "I would prefer that you ask next time," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Ask." "Mom, we're trying to help you manage things. You're getting older, and sometimes older people miss important details." There it was again. The assumption that age had made me incompetent, that I needed their management and oversight. That night I called Mrs. Rodriguez. "I want to list the house," I said. "As soon as possible." "Wonderful. I'll draw up the paperwork and bring it by tomorrow. Are you feeling good about your decision?" "I'm feeling like it's time," I said. The next morning, while Marcus and Tanya were out, Mrs. Rodriguez came with the listing agreement. I signed the papers with a steady hand, officially putting my house on the market. "I have a showing request already," she said. "A young couple with 2 children. They saw the photos online and want to see it this weekend." "This weekend?" "That's very fast. I told you this house would move quickly." Are you prepared for that? Was I prepared? I thought about my applications to Florida communities, my research into moving companies, my growing savings account that would fund my new life. Yes, I said. I'm ready. That evening, I made a decision that I knew would change everything. Instead of eating dinner early and alone as I had been doing, I set the table for 6 and prepared a meal for the whole family. I made Marcus's favorite pot roast, the way I had when he was a boy. I made homemade biscuits and green beans with bacon, and for dessert, I made the chocolate cake that had been a family tradition for birthdays and special occasions. When everyone came home and saw the spread, they were surprised. "What's the occasion?" Marcus asked. "No occasion," I said. "I just thought it would be nice for us all to eat together like a family." It was a beautiful dinner, actually. The children chattered about school, Marcus told stories from work, and for a moment, it felt like the family dinners I remembered from when my children were small. Tanya was even pleasant, complimenting the pot roast and asking for the recipe. After dinner, as we were clearing the table, I made my announcement. "I have something to tell you all," I said, and something in my tone made everyone stop and look at me. "I've decided to move to Florida." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the kitchen clock ticking. "What do you mean, move to Florida?" Marcus asked finally. "I mean I'm going to sell the house and relocate to St. Petersburg. I've already spoken with several senior communities, and I think it's time for a new chapter in my life." Tanya was the first to react. "Sell the house. But Marcus, what about our renovation plans? What about the contractor?" "This is very sudden, Mom," Marcus said, his voice careful and controlled. "Have you really thought this through?" "I've been thinking about it for weeks," I said, "and I've made my decision." "What about us?" Tanya asked, her voice rising. "Where are we supposed to live?" For the first time in 3 years, I looked at my daughter-in-law and smiled with genuine warmth. "I'm sure you'll figure something out," I said. "You're both very capable adults." The look on their faces was worth every moment of doubt I had experienced. They had become so comfortable with their arrangement, so convinced that I needed them more than they needed me, that they had never considered what would happen if I decided to take back control of my own life. But I wasn't done yet. The best part was still to come. If I had expected Marcus and Tanya to graciously accept my decision and wish me well in my new adventure, I was quickly proven wrong. What followed my announcement was a masterclass in emotional manipulation that would have worked on the old Dorothy. But I wasn't her anymore. The first phase was shock and denial. For the rest of that evening, they kept asking me to repeat what I had said, as if they hadn't heard me correctly. "You can't be serious about selling the house," Tanya said for the 4th time as we finished cleaning up dinner. "This is just some kind of phase, right? Like a midlife crisis, except later in life." "It's not a phase," I said calmly, putting the last plate in the dishwasher. "I've already signed the listing agreement. The house goes on the market Monday." Marcus sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs. "Mom, this is crazy. You're 67 years old. You can't just pack up and move across the country like some college kid." "Why not?" I asked. "What exactly is stopping me?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, apparently realizing that all of his reasons amounted to, "Because we don't want you to." The second phase began the next morning, bargaining. "Mom, let's talk about this rationally," Marcus said over coffee. "If you're unhappy with our living arrangement, we can make changes. We can be more flexible about the dinner schedule, maybe set up better boundaries." Boundaries. Now that I was threatening to leave, suddenly boundaries were negotiable. "And the bathroom renovation," Tanya added quickly. "We don't have to do that right away. We can wait, or maybe we could look at less expensive options." "What if we helped more around the house?" Marcus continued. "I know we've been taking advantage of your generosity. We can do better." It was almost touching, this sudden recognition of my generosity. "Almost. I appreciate that," I said. "But my mind is made up." "But what about the grandchildren?" Tanya played what she clearly thought was her trump card. "Kira and Jaden adore you. How can you just abandon them?" "Abandon them." The word was chosen carefully, designed to make me feel guilty and selfish. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said. "Florida isn't Mars. There are planes and phones and video calls." "It's not the same," Marcus said. "They need their grandmother in their lives, not just for holiday visits." The old Dorothy would have crumbled at this point. The grandmother who had spent countless hours babysitting, helping with homework, and providing free childcare would have felt terrible about the impact on the children. But the new Dorothy had some questions. "When's the last time either of you asked me to spend quality time with Jaden and Kira?" I asked. "When's the last time you suggested I take them somewhere special, or included me in planning their activities?" They were quiet. "You want me to stay for the children, but you treat me like hired help when it comes to the children. I'm good enough to babysit when you want to go out, but not good enough to have opinions about their bedtimes or their discipline or their education." That's not fair, Tanya protested. You're their grandmother, not their parent. Exactly, I said. I'm their grandmother. I should be the person who spoils them and tells them stories and takes them on adventures. Instead, I'm the person who watches them while you live your lives. By phase 3, which started that weekend, the bargaining had turned into anger and accusations. This is so selfish, Tanya announced on Saturday morning. We've built our whole life around this arrangement. The kids are settled in their school, Marcus has a good job nearby, and I have clients at the salon who depend on me. You've built your life around living in my house rent-free, I corrected. That's not the same thing. Rent-free, Marcus's voice rose. Mom, we contribute to this household. We buy groceries, we pay utilities. You buy some groceries and split utilities 6 ways when there used to be just one person living here, I said. That's not the same as rent. We also maintain the property, Tanya added. We do repairs and yard work. I almost laughed. Marcus changed a light bulb last month, and you planted some flowers in the front bed. I still clean the house, do most of the laundry, and handle all the paperwork and bills. And we pay you back by providing companionship. Marcus said, you were lonely before we moved in. Companionship. Being ignored at dinner and excluded from conversations was companionship. I was alone? I said. That's different from being lonely. And I'd rather be alone and respected than surrounded by people who treat me like an inconvenience. That hit home. I could see it in their faces. Phase 4 was the most painful emotional blackmail. You know what this is really about? Tanya said on Sunday evening, her voice cold and cutting. You're jealous. You're jealous that Marcus and I have a happy marriage and a family, and you're all alone. So you want to punish us. That's not, I started, but she cut me off. It is. You want to break up our family because you're bitter about being a widow. You want everyone else to be as miserable as you are. But the words were designed to hurt, and they did. But they also revealed something important. Tanya saw our living arrangement as me being generous to them, despite all her claims about doing me favors. If that's what you think of me, I said quietly, then you'll be happier when I'm gone. Marcus tried a different approach. Mom, I know we haven't been perfect housemates. But family is supposed to stick together through tough times. Dad wouldn't want you to break up the family like this. Bringing James into it was a low blow, and we both knew it. Your father, I said, standing up straighter, spent 35 years making sure I felt valued and respected in my own home. He would be appalled at how you've been treating me. But the moment that sealed my resolve came Monday evening. The house had been officially listed that morning, and Mrs. Rodriguez called to tell me we already had 3 showing requests. When I shared this news at dinner, thinking they had accepted the reality of the situation, Marcus and Tanya exchanged a look that I recognized from their phone conversation with Lisa. Mom, Marcus said carefully, Tanya and I have been talking, and we're concerned about your decision-making lately. What do you mean? Well, this sudden desire to uproot your entire life and move across the country, it's not like you. It's impulsive and irrational. I felt a chill run down my spine. It's not impulsive. I've been planning this for weeks. That's what worries us, Tanya said, leaning forward with fake concern. You've been secretive, making major decisions without consulting your family. That's not normal behavior. It's my house and my money. Why would I need to consult anyone? Because, Marcus said slowly, we love you and we're worried about you. Sometimes when people get older, they can make decisions that aren't in their best interest. There it was. The suggestion that I was mentally incompetent, that my desire for independence was a sign of cognitive decline. Are you questioning my mental capacity? I asked directly. We're just saying that maybe you should talk to someone, Tanya said. A counselor, or maybe your doctor. Someone objective who can help you think through whether this is really what you want. Someone who could be convinced that a 67-year-old woman wanting to move to Florida was evidence of dementia or depression. I looked at my son, this man I had raised with such love and hope, and realized that he was willing to suggest I was losing my mind rather than accept that I was unhappy living with him. I see, I said. That night, I called Mrs. Rodriguez. How quickly can we close if we get a good offer? I asked. With a cash buyer, maybe 3 weeks. With financing, 4 to 6 weeks. Are you getting pressure to slow down? The opposite, I said. I want to speed up. The next morning, I did something I had never done before in my adult life. I went to the bank and opened a new checking account that only I knew about. I transferred enough money to cover my move, my first year's expenses in Florida, and a comfortable cushion for emergencies. Then I called Sunshine Palms in St. Petersburg. Janet, this is Dorothy Washington. We spoke a few weeks ago about your community. Of course. How are you doing with your plans? I'm ready to move forward. How quickly could I move in if I put down a deposit today? Well, we do have a lovely 2-bedroom condo that just became available. The previous resident moved to assisted living to be closer to her daughter. If you wire the deposit today, you could move in as early as next month. Next month. 4 weeks from now, I could be sitting by a lake in Florida, drinking coffee with new friends who actually wanted my company. Let's do it, I said. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. I felt proud of myself. Dorothy Washington was taking her life back, one decision at a time. The house sold in 6 days. When Mrs. Rodriguez called me with the news that we had received 3 offers, all above asking price, 2 of them cash, I felt a mixture of excitement and disbelief. After years of feeling powerless, everything was suddenly moving at lightning speed. The highest offer is from the Johnsons, the young couple with 2 children who saw it first. Mrs. Rodriguez explained. They're offering $15,000 over asking, all cash, with a 30-day close. They said they fell in love with the house the moment they walked in. I fell in love with the house. Just like James and I had 23 years ago. They also wrote a letter. Mrs. Rodriguez continued. They said they can envision their children growing up there, playing in the backyard, learning to ride bikes on that quiet street. They promised to take good care of it. I accepted their offer immediately. What followed was the strangest 3 weeks of my life. I was simultaneously planning my escape and living with people who were growing more desperate and angry by the day. Marcus and Tanya had initially insisted the house wouldn't sell quickly. In this economy, with interest rates the way they are, you'll be lucky to get an offer in 6 months, Marcus had said confidently. When I told them about the multiple offers and 30-day close, the look on their faces was priceless. 30 days. Tanya's voice cracked. We're supposed to find a place and move out in 30 days. You've had 3 years to save for your own place, I reminded her gently. But we thought we had more time. We thought you'd come to your senses. Come to my senses, as if wanting to be treated with respect in my own home was insanity. They swung between being furious with me and trying to convince me to let them stay in the house and buy it from me instead. We could take over the payments, Marcus suggested. We'll get financing and buy it at the price you would have gotten from these other people. There are no payments, I said. The house is paid off. Then we'll get a mortgage for the full amount. I almost laughed. Marcus, you've been unable to save enough for a rental deposit in 3 years. What bank is going to give you a mortgage for $400,000? The number seemed to shock him. I don't think he had realized how much the house was actually worth. Meanwhile, I was busy with my own preparations. I had found a moving company that specialized in long-distance relocations for seniors. They would pack everything for me, put the items I wanted into storage in Florida, and donate the furniture I was leaving behind. I was keeping my grandmother's rocking chair, James's handmade coffee table, our bedroom furniture, and my kitchen table, the pieces that held memories I wanted to carry with me. I had also been secretly going through the house, removing and storing my personal items. Photo albums, important documents, jewelry, family heirlooms. All the things that truly belonged to me were slowly disappearing into boxes that I kept in my bedroom closet. Tanya noticed when her favorite serving platter, actually my mother's china that I had let her use for entertaining, disappeared from the cabinet. Where's the good platter? She asked one evening. I packed it. I said simply. Packed it. But we need it for our dinner party next weekend. Our dinner party. In my house that was being sold. Using my dishes to entertain her friends. You'll have to use something else, I said. The reality of the situation was starting to sink in, and they didn't like it. 2 weeks before the closing, they made their final, most desperate attempt to stop me. I came home from running errands to find Marcus, Tanya, and my daughter Lisa sitting in my living room. Lisa had flown in from California, and they all had serious expressions on their faces. Mom, we need to talk, Marcus said. Lisa has some concerns about what you're doing. Lisa, my middle child, had always been the peacemaker in the family. She was also the one who lived the farthest away and knew the least about the actual dynamics in my house over the past 3 years. Dorothy, Lisa said, using my full name the way she had when she was trying to be the adult in the room, I'm worried about you. Marcus and Tanya have told me about this sudden decision to sell the house and move to Florida. It seems very unlike you. I sat down in my own living room and looked at my children, one who had been taking advantage of me for years, and one who lived 2,000 miles away and thought she understood the situation. What seems unlike me? I asked. Well, you've lived in this house for over 20 years. All your memories with Dad are here. Your friends, your doctor, your routine, everything familiar is here. And now you want to give all that up to move somewhere you've never been, to live with strangers. Strangers. She meant the lovely people at Sunshine Palms who had welcomed me warmly and were excited about my arrival. Compared to the family members who treated me like a burden, these strangers had shown me more kindness in a few phone conversations than I had experienced at home in months. Lisa, I said carefully, when's the last time you spent more than 3 days in this house? What does that have to do with anything? It means you don't know what my life has been like. You don't know how I've been treated or how I've been made to feel. Marcus told me you've been feeling a little depressed. Marcus told you I've been depressed. I interrupted, looking at my son. Did Marcus also tell you that he goes through my personal papers without asking? Did he mention that his wife wants to throw away all my furniture and redecorate my house to her taste? Did he explain that they expect me to pay for expensive renovations that I don't want, or that they want me to eat dinner alone so their family can have the table? Lisa looked confused. I don't understand. Did he tell you? I continued, my voice getting stronger, that they've been telling people this house belongs to them, and that I live here out of their charity. Mum, that's not, Marcus started. It's not what? It's not true. Because I heard you say it, Marcus. I heard you tell your sister that I should be grateful you're willing to take care of me in your house. Lisa looked between Marcus and me, beginning to understand that she had only heard one side of the story. But Mom, she said more gently, even if there have been some problems, is moving to Florida really the answer? Couldn't you all work things out? I stood up and walked to my bedroom. From my closet, I pulled out a folder I had been saving for this moment. I returned to the living room and set it on the coffee table. This is the deed to this house, I said, opening the folder. You'll notice both your father's name and my name are on it. When he died, ownership transferred entirely to me. I pulled out another paper. This is the mortgage, stamped paid on FLL 2 years before your father died. We owned this house free and clear. Another paper. This is my bank statement, showing my monthly pension and my savings account, which has enough money in it for me to live comfortably for the rest of my life. More papers. These are the receipts for the utilities, property taxes, insurance, and repairs I've been paying for the past 3 years, while Marcus and Tanya contributed maybe 30% of the household expenses. I spread all the papers out on the coffee table like evidence in a trial. And this, I said, pulling out the final document, is the sales contract for this house, which sold for $423,000 to a lovely young family who will actually appreciate it. The silence in the room was deafening. So to answer your question, Lisa, I said, my voice calm and steady, I'm not a depressed old woman making irrational decisions. I'm not a senile person who needs to be managed by her family. I'm a property owner who is tired of being treated like a tenant in her own home. I'm selling my house, taking my money, and moving somewhere I'll be valued and respected. I looked directly at Marcus. You've spent 3 years telling people that you're taking care of me. The truth is I've been taking care of all of you, and I'm done. Lisa stared at the papers, then at Marcus, then back at me. Marcus, is this true? Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. It's more complicated than that. It's not complicated, I said. It's simple. This is my house. It's been my house for 23 years, and I have every right to sell it and move wherever I want to live. Tanya, who had been silent through most of this confrontation, finally spoke. So what are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go? I looked at her with genuine compassion. Despite everything, I didn't want to see my grandchildren hurt. You're going to do what every other family does, I said. You're going to find an apartment you can afford, sign a lease, and build your own life. You're going to stand on your own feet. But we can't afford anything decent in this area, Marcus protested. Not with what I make. Then maybe you need to consider a different area, or a different job, or a smaller place until you can save up for something better, I said. That's what your father and I did. That's what most people do. The closing was scheduled for Friday. On Thursday night, I packed my suitcases and loaded my car with the essentials I would need for my first few weeks in Florida. The moving truck was coming the next day to pack everything else. As I was putting my jewelry box in the car, Marcus came outside. Mom, I want to apologize, he said. I know we haven't treated you the way we should have. I stopped and looked at him. My firstborn, the baby I had rocked to sleep and worried over and sacrificed for. Even now, even after everything, my heart ached for him. I appreciate that, Marcus, I said. But this isn't about punishment. This is about me choosing to live differently. I know, he said, and I want you to be happy, I really do. I wish we had figured out how to make this work. We could have, I said gently. If you had seen me as your mother instead of as your landlady. If you had treated me like family instead of like staff. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. And I always will. But love isn't enough if there's no respect to go with it. The next morning, I signed the closing papers and handed the keys to the Johnson family. Mrs. Johnson, about the same age I had been when James and I bought the house, was practically glowing with excitement. Thank you so much for selling to us, she said. We're going to take such good care of your home. I know you will, I said. Fill it with love and laughter. That's what it's meant for. As I drove away from the house where I had spent 23 years, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw Marcus and Tanya loading a U-Haul truck. They had found a rental house about 30 minutes away, smaller than what they were used to, but clean and safe for the children. I felt sad, of course. Endings are always sad, even when they're necessary. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt proud, I felt free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about tomorrow. 6 months later, I was sitting on my screened porch overlooking the small lake at Sunshine Palms, drinking coffee and watching a great blue heron fish in the shallow water. The morning sun painted everything golden, and I could hear my neighbor Evelyn Martinez humming as she tended her garden next door. "Dorothy! You ready for our walk?" Evelyn called over the fence that separated our little patios. "Just let me grab my hat," I called back. This was my new routine. Every morning at 8 o'clock, Evelyn and I walked the mile-long trail around the lake, talking about everything and nothing. She was 72, a retired nurse from Chicago who had moved to Florida 5 years earlier after her husband died. Like me, she had adult children who had initially questioned her decision to start over so late in life. "The difference between you and me," she had told me during one of our early walks, "is that my kids were worried I'd be lonely. Sounds like your family was worried they'd have to be independent." Evelyn had become the friend I hadn't realized I was missing. She was smart, funny, and had no tolerance for self-pity or dwelling on the past. "You made a brave choice," she told me during my first week, when I was still second-guessing myself. "Now stop looking backward and start enjoying the life you created." The life I had created was better than I had dared to hope. My 2-bedroom condo was bright and airy, with large windows that let in the Florida sunshine and a view of the water that never got old. I had decorated it with my favorite pieces from the old house, mixed with some new finds from local shops. It felt like me in a way my old house hadn't felt for years. I had joined the book club, where we read everything from literary fiction to mystery novels and debated them over wine and cheese. I volunteered twice a week at the local elementary school, helping children learn to read. It reminded me of my years as a school secretary, but without the stress and bureaucracy. On weekends, a group of us would drive to the beach, or visit local museums, or try new restaurants. Sometimes I would spend the day alone, reading on my porch or working in the small garden plot that came with my unit. The luxury of choosing how to spend my time, without having to consider anyone else's needs or schedules, still felt miraculous. But the most surprising part of my new life was how much I was enjoying my own company. For years I had felt like I needed to be needed, like my worth was tied to how much I was taking care of other people. Now I was discovering that Dorothy Washington was an interesting person in her own right, with opinions and interests that had nothing to do with being someone's mother or grandmother. "You look different," Evelyn observed one morning as we paused to watch a family of ducks swim across the lake. "Younger. More yourself, if that makes sense." It did make sense. I felt like I had shed a skin that had been too small for me, like a snake outgrowing its old constraints. The phone calls from home had been awkward at first. Marcus called every Sunday, and our conversations were careful and polite. He would update me on the children's activities, tell me about his work, and ask about my health and my situation down there, as if Florida was a temporary experiment that might not work out. Tanya rarely spoke to me directly, but I could hear her in the background sometimes, commenting on what Marcus was telling me. It was clear she was still angry about having to find their own place and manage their own household expenses. But the children called me too, and those conversations were the highlight of my week. Jaden told me about his baseball team and asked when I was coming to visit. Kira sent me drawings through the mail and wanted to know if there were alligators in my lake. There weren't, but there were turtles, which she found almost as exciting. "Grandma Dorothy, are you happy in Florida?" Kira asked me during one call. "I am, sweetheart. Very happy." "Good," she said with the serious tone that 8-year-olds use when they're trying to be grown up. "Daddy said you needed to find your smile again." Find my smile again. Maybe Marcus understood more than I had given him credit for. The turning point in our relationship came during my 4th month in Florida. Marcus called on a Tuesday instead of his usual Sunday, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. "Mom, I need to apologize to you," he said without preamble. "Really apologize? Not just say sorry because it's what you want to hear?" I set down my coffee cup and gave him my full attention. "I've been thinking about the last 3 years, really thinking about them. And I realized that we treated you terribly. Not just inconsiderately or thoughtlessly, but actually badly. We made you feel unwelcome in your own home, and that's unforgivable." I could hear the emotion in his voice, and it reminded me of the little boy who used to come to me with scraped knees and hurt feelings. "What made you realize this?" I asked gently. "Living on our own again," he said with a rueful laugh. paying rent and utilities and buying all our own groceries, managing our own household and dealing with repairs and responsibilities. I forgot how much work it is to run a home, and how expensive everything has gotten. He paused, and I could hear him take a deep breath. But more than that, Mom, I realized that we had stopped seeing you as a person. You became this function in our lives. Someone to watch the kids, or help with expenses, or handle the boring adult stuff we didn't want to deal with. We forgot that you had your own needs and wants and dreams. The tears sprang to my eyes. This was the conversation I had been waiting for, without even realizing it. And Tanya, I asked. Tanya's struggling more, he admitted. She's embarrassed, and she's angry at herself. And sometimes that comes out as being angry at you. But she knows we were wrong. She knows you deserved better from us. I hope she knows I don't hate her, I said. I was hurt, but I don't hate either of you. I know, Mom. And that almost makes it worse. How gracious you're being about all of this. We talked for another hour, really talked. In a way we hadn't in years. He told me about the struggles of managing their own household budget, the stress of being fully responsible for their family's welfare, and how much they missed the security and comfort I had provided. But he also told me about the pride he felt in making it work, in providing for his family independently, in teaching his children that adults take care of themselves. The kids are proud of us too, he said. Jaden told his teacher that his dad and mom bought their own house now like real grown-ups. It hurt to hear, but it also felt good. I'm proud of you too, baby, I said. This is what I wanted for you. Not punishment, but growth. I know that now. I just wish we had figured it out before you had to leave. Maybe I needed to leave for all of us to figure it out, I said. 2 weeks later, Marcus, Tanya, and the children flew down to Florida for a long weekend visit. It was the first time I had seen them since the day I moved out, and I was nervous about how it would go. I needn't have worried. The children were delighted with everything: the lake, the pool, the friendly neighbors who stopped to chat and admire their Florida tans. They met Evelyn, who spoiled them with homemade cookies and stories about her own grandchildren. But the real breakthrough came on Saturday evening, after the children were asleep in my guest room. The four of us were sitting on the porch, listening to the night sounds and watching the stars reflect on the water. Mom, Tanya said suddenly, I owe you an apology. I looked at her with surprise. She had been polite but distant all weekend, and I hadn't expected this. I was jealous of you, she continued, her voice quiet. You had this beautiful house and this secure life, and Marcus and I were struggling. When we moved in, I thought it was temporary, but then it became comfortable, and I started resenting that you had so much when we had so little. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But I realize now that you didn't have so much because it was handed to you. You had so much because you worked for it, for 40 years. You and Mr. James built that life together, and I had no right to act like you owed us a piece of it. Tanya, I started, but she held up her hand. Let me finish. I also realized that I was threatened by you. You're such a good grandmother, and the kids love you so much, and I was afraid they'd think you were better than me at taking care of them. That's not. I know it's not rational. But I felt like I had to compete with you, and that made me mean. I said things and did things that were designed to make you feel small, because I felt small. She looked at me directly for the first time all weekend. You deserved so much better from us. And I'm sorry. I'm really truly sorry. I reached over and took her hand. I forgive you, honey. And for what it's worth, you're a good mother. Different from me, but good. The children are lucky to have you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the gentle lapping of water against the shore. So what happens now? Marcus asked eventually. Now we all keep living our lives, I said. You in your house, me in mine. You visit when you can, I visit when I can. We stay in touch, we support each other from a distance, and we remember that love doesn't mean living in each other's pockets. And if you need anything, Tanya asked, I know we didn't take good care of you before, but if you ever need help, I'll ask, I promised. And if you need anything, advice, emergency babysitting, when you visit, someone to listen, you'll ask me. Deal, Marcus said. They flew home the next day, and I went back to my peaceful routine. But something had shifted. The sadness and guilt I had been carrying about the family situation had lifted, replaced by something lighter and more hopeful. A year later, I was elected to the board of directors at Sunshine Palms. I had organized a mentorship program that paired residents with local high school students, and it had been so successful that other communities were asking for advice on starting their own programs. You know what I love about you, Dorothy? Evelyn said one evening as we sat on my porch, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset. You didn't just escape your old life, you built a new one. She was right. I hadn't just run away from a bad situation, I had run toward a good one. I had chosen to be brave, and that bravery had been rewarded with a life that felt authentically mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Kira. Grandma Dorothy, I wrote a story about you for school. It's called My Brave Grandmother Who Moved to Florida. I got an A+. I smiled and texted back. I can't wait to read it when you visit this summer. This summer would be their second visit, and we already had plans: the beach, a day trip to Disney World, a boat tour of the Everglades. But mostly we would just spend time together, building new memories that belonged to this version of our family. As the sun disappeared behind the palm trees and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, defeated, invisible, convinced that her life was over at 67. That woman couldn't have imagined this life, sitting by a lake in Florida, surrounded by friends who valued her company, planning adventures with grandchildren who were proud of her courage. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is disappoint the people who are disappointed in the real you, and find the people who celebrate who you actually are. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to walk away from what's hurting you, you discover that what you're walking toward is exactly the life you were meant to live. My name is Dorothy Washington. I'm 68 years old, and this is the story of how I learned that it's never too late to come home to yourself.